All right, so just a quick show of hands then. Does anyone know what Amnesty... who's heard of Amnesty International before? All right, keep your hand up if you know what we do. Cool, yep, all right. So we're an international human rights organization. What that means in sort of everyday people language is that we stand up for people that don't have a voice, and we do this worldwide. We've been around since 1961. I've not been around since 1961, Amnesty has. But we've been in New Zealand since 1965, and it's an amazing story, which I'll really quickly share with you, just because I read it, just like yesterday. A lady called Mary Singleton read a book by Peter Benenson, who is the guy that started Amnesty International, and she was like, she was a teacher in Wellington, and she read the story about human rights and how certain people are still having their human rights violated. This was 1965, right? And she said, she thought to herself, wow, I'm a teacher, and I'd heard about some of these countries, but France is a first world nation. I don't think that's right. So she wrote to our International Secretariat in London. It had just been started up 4 years before that, and they wrote back to her and said, actually, there's this guy, who I can't remember his name, he's in Wellington, right across town from you. And she, being Wellington in 1965, she knew him. And she taught his little girl at school a few years before that. And so she met up with him, and then they got together, and they basically a few years after that, Amnesty International New Zealand was born. So we were one of the first in the world, which is, I think, is pretty cool. The other thing is while we're not your traditional charity, so we don't take your money in and give it to people, we are still completely and 100% funded by people, just like you, supporters. We don't accept any government funding, so it means we can speak out against the government, whichever government, wherever we are in the world, which is a really cool thing. And so it means also that data and information is our lifeblood. An interested action taker, so who's heard about change.org? Yeah, so that kind of thing. We do that. Part of what we do is that. And so you put your stuff in there, and then we take your thing, we're like, Mr. Damien is really angry about this, and we send that information to Kim Jong-un. No, we don't. I'm just kidding. But someone who takes action on something will take more action on other similar things if we tell them how it went. So there's no help to us if, for example, you take action on something and 8 months later we finally get into our database and we're like, oh, look, you took action on this 8 months ago. And then also, similarly, if you have taken action on something, you might then find out that we're completely self-funded funded by supporters and might want to give us a little bit of money, which would be great. And again, you're not going to do that if you did something 8 months ago and we didn't talk to you until then. So, disclaimer, I'm not the technical lead on the project I'm about to talk about. I didn't code any of it myself, and any technical knowledge I do have is self-taught. So if I sound crazy or misinformed, I probably am. But I will come back to any of you if you want more detail, need it, want it. I won't knowingly lie or misinform. So my details will be right at the end if you did want to actually hear more about this. This is a really cool photo, actually. All these photos are completely like open source, like allowed to be used photos, but this one I thought was particularly cool. It's actually NASA's mission control from like the 60s or something. I've just seen The Martian, so anyway. So getting data in and out of different computer systems shouldn't be like NASA's mission control. At the end of the day, it's just zeros and ones in one place or another. But that's honestly what it felt like at Amnesty New Zealand just a few months ago, about last year. Our Customer Relation Management Database, CRM, hosted locally on a Microsoft SQL server. Can't access it off-site without a VPN and all sorts of other complicated remote desktop technology. Okay, it's not actually that complicated, but it's not user-friendly. Our website's hosted on Amazon's AWS using Drupal 6, and our payment provider somewhere else completely. So none of these systems talk to each other, and it was a series of manual exports and imports to get any kind of synchronization. So that cool stuff I talked about before where we had got to an action taker, a day after they took action, that wasn't going to happen anytime soon. We then decided, because we had budget approved for a redesign for our website, that we would try and fix some of this mess. There's no point having a shiny new front end to our website and then have the back of it still this giant spaghetti mess. So we had gotten there through a slow accumulation of systems over time. I've been with Amnesty for over 8 years, officially here in New Zealand, so some of it was my fault. And addition of new technologies that didn't talk to old ones, that kind of thing. It was something that happened very gradually, and small band-aid fixes we'd been doing was costing us time and money that we didn't want to spend. So that money that we'd worked really hard to fundraise on one end, we were wasting at the other end. And why I'm here today to talk to you about it, so we didn't want to be locked in. I said all this to our database provider, and they very kindly offered it to build us a new website. They were like, look, we can give you this really shiny new website. It'll look great, and it'll talk to our database perfectly. And it won't talk to anything else at all because it's our website hosted on our servers. They showed us great examples of other charities and other organizations using their off-the-shelf website. It was even fairly reasonably priced. But I didn't want to be locked in with one supporter. I wanted to stay with the flexibility that Drupal offered us, and I wanted to be able to move database providers if I wanted to, but I didn't want them to know that. So a bit of a shameless plug. We did have amazing support from partners and the people that coded the thing for us. A couple that I can mention later on, but basically the person that hosts our Drupal site for us has supported us for many, many years and helps us keep our core up to date and that kind of stuff, which is really helpful for me because some of you guys probably come from really huge corporates, but it's just me and one database assistant in our entire organization. And the thing is, our turnover is not like a small to medium business, which is what we're running. So it's kind of the back and forth of charity work, really, where you've got like a really small sort of team working on basically sometimes enterprise level stuff. So that was one of the reasons why we didn't want to stay with Drupal. We'd heard things like, Obama's using it, it'll be great. So if anyone's interested later on, I can talk to you offline about some of our people that we have worked with. But yeah, it was to actually talk to people that know what they're talking about is great. So what was the first step? It was to work out exactly what kind of data we needed to get from where and to where. So there was a talk earlier on this morning, I think it may have even been one of the keynotes that was saying, don't build for now, build for the future. And that's really where we went in thinking about this. So the great thing is I was the business lead, not the technical lead, so I can tell you what I wanted to do was this was the amount of data I needed and what bits that I needed to talk to, and I needed it to talk to it on our database, which I already know backwards and forwards. I've actually know personally many other organizations that decide to fire up a new database every time they need a new business need, and so then they end up a little bit locked down the track with 3 or 4 databases, none of which talk to each other, and then they're sort of right back to where before we were. And so our whole thing was that we didn't want, we wanted everything to talk to our CRM, because at the moment this is the CRM that we're working with. So part 1 of the project was negotiating exactly what access to which data, and then I worked with one of our partners to create the API design. So we wrote the REST API documentation ourselves with no knowledge of the code that it needed to talk to. We just basically wrote the documentation first and then gave it to our database provider and said, make this happen. And then again, meanwhile, over in Webland, this was our website. That's actually from that website where you can look at snapshots from a long time ago, because I forgot to take a screenshot before. And we ended up with this, which is, I think it's much prettier. It looks better on a small screen when you can zoom in and stuff, but the whole point of our redesign was to be user-focused. So again, it was all about our supporters. And when we went around, the first time we did the redesign, which I was around for in 2008, we went around all the staff and then all the people that the staff talked to, and we said, what do you want? And what we ended up with was a website for the staff to use, which really wasn't helpful at all. So this time we kind of took a step back and thought, what do people want to do? So if you don't know anything about Amnesty at all, you land on our website and the first two things you see, take action now, something horrific's happening, do something about it, and then right below it, oh, please give us money so that we can keep doing things for these, doing things on behalf of these horrific things that happen. And then later on, it's maybe 3 or 4 additional bits of information. And then later on again, there's all the other stuff. So the idea is if you're an expert user, so a supporter that's been with us for 15 years, you're either going to know exactly where to find the information, or we can just give you the link because you'll know me and then you'll email me and I'll send you the link. There's no need to cater for you, the awesome supporter that's been around for 15 years, because we're already talking to you on the phone and all that kind of stuff. But the 90% of the people that land on our site, that's who we want to talk to. So, but where it is important for what we're talking about today is this kind of thing. So just like the change.orgs of the world, except that our entire point, again, at the other end of the thing, after we've taken the action, is the fundraising side of things. So when you click on this button here, I know, right? Mid-90s animation. Yeah. It goes through to something that looks a lot like this. Well, it looks exactly like this because it's a screenshot. But each one of these fields, and a lot of others that you can't see as a supporter, as a person that's randomly on our website, talks to our database, and that's the really cool thing. So one or two things that we've done that I've been particularly proud of, which also, again, with APIs. So that field there talks straight to Address Finder's API, which I know New Zealand Post here today, but I think Address Finder also talked to their API. And that's pretty cool. So it does that thing where when you start typing your address, it comes up automatically. That in and of itself took care of so many bad addresses and like people misspelling their own street names and things, which obviously happens quite a lot. And the other thing it stopped, which I found really highly amusing, was people that named their houses. And I don't know if you guys know anything about mass mailing, but when you mass mail here in New Zealand Post will give you a discount if more than 80% of your 85% of your addresses are correct according to New Zealand Post. So if someone calls their house the Villa, that doesn't cut it for New Zealand Post. There was a really amusing story which I heard from it was a large high-end retailer once that wasn't using that, and then when they started using that, they got more complaints for their customers because their customers were all high-end customers, and they were like, but my house is called the Manor. And so then they went back to not getting the discount just so that they could keep their customers happy, which I found was quite funny. We haven't done that. We've gone with the discount. So what we did was this kind of, it's actually too small to read, but so at the top it says website, other apps, offline. So we also get data offline quite a bit. We get kids out there signing petitions on little bits of paper. That we're never going to be able to stop, and we're not going to want to stop it, but we wanted to minimize the offline data, obviously. And then some of it talks to the payment provider, some of it doesn't, and then it all goes through to this one box, which I called manual interventions. So up to 8 months ago, that was my assistant. And then it goes through to the database. And so what we did was this. I warned you it wasn't technical. So the offline still comes off on its own little track, but everything else talks to the API, including this backwards and forwards with the payment provider, which again, we use the payment provider's API, and that was a big thing as well, because now a lot of our things, like for example the website, will automatically check like credit card data and things like that, so we don't have to then 2 months later, well not 2 months, but a few days later work out that credit card wasn't a real one or whatever. So yeah, actually sorry, hold on. Yeah, so what this actually means for a business point of view, though, is that by automating a lot of the stuff, the manual intervention required now is just a quick checking of the data that has been entered by the supporter themselves. We reduced our turnaround time for action data from 2 weeks to 1 day. So previously, we'd only know actually that you took action 2 weeks later or more, and now it's less than a day. And for 3 to 5 days to 1 day for donation data as well. So basically every day we're processing it, and every day we can do something about it. Either thank you instantly, well, the thanking you instantly already happens, but say something really big happens on the case that you just took action on, which does happen, we could actually go straight back out to you and go, hey, thanks for taking action, like yesterday. Did you know that this happened this morning? If you want to take further action or do something. Yeah. So that was probably super short, but questions if you have any.
Can you give some examples of these actions you're talking about?
Yeah. So that one there, this is a live one actually, I think, right now. I took the screenshots 4 days ago, so unless they've changed it. So this guy, Shahrul Izani bin Supraman, is a Malaysian IT student actually. He was 19 when arrested, found possession of drugs, and he's on death row. So the idea is that, it's really bad. You click, you take action, and, sorry. What am I doing? So then when you click submit here, even if you click I would not like to receive the next action email, this data goes straight through to, in this one, probably, I can't read it right now, I don't know who it goes to, but it'll probably be someone like the Malaysian Embassy here in New Zealand, or straight away to the Ministry of Justice in Malaysia or something along those lines. So unlike the change.orgs of the world, and I might be wrong because I haven't looked into some of their stuff recently, Amnesty International's information is all based on our own research, so we never rely on anyone else's research. If it's a case that we're taking action on, we would have had our own research backing that up, and in a similar vein, the action that we require from the supporters worldwide will be research-based. So it'll be like, if we talk to this embassy person or the embassy person in your country, or in some of our cases has been to the New Zealand government. So the other massive one that we're working on right now is double the refugee quota. The New Zealand government haven't increased the refugee quota for so many years that I can't remember. It's quite a few years. I think it's something like 20-something years, and it's been at 750 people. So all we're asking for is double that quota, which is really such a small number that really they should just say yes, but they haven't. And but that one, for example, if you find it on our website and you take action, that goes straight to John Key or the Minister of Immigration. Yeah, I don't work in campaigns, which is why some of that might be wrong, but if you read it on the site, it tells you exactly who it's going to. And if you untick it, it goes into our database, but it puts a do not mail on your record, and in that way we can then perhaps contact you later and say, hey, by phone or whatever, but we do that. Some of that stuff has all been automated as well, which I think is quite cool. Does that make sense?
Is your API exposed publicly?
No, so it's what I should have said actually, the API was part of that not being locked in thing was actually creating this API with our database provider. So I was really shocked that when we started down this journey 8 months ago, when I talked to the database provider, they were like, oh, we don't really have an API. And I was like, this is 2014, seriously? And so they didn't, and they weren't interested in it. They were interested in building little tiny programs for all of their customers separately to each other, and nothing sort of centralized at all. So part of my little sort of bid for API, the API world, is actually, now that I've built this, I may have sneakily given the documentation of the API to other customers I know of the database provider. And so trying to, create a revolution from within. Because I think it's ridiculous. I don't think that I should have paid the amount I did pay for that development. But now that I have, I'm also wanting for other customers to take advantage of that. I completely get some of you're with the big corporates are needing to make, like I think the ASB guy just before was like, how do I monetize this? But even he was like, oh, but I'll give it to you for free to develop, I don't, and I was completely cool with that. I was like, look, if I pay per transaction or whatever, I can work that into my expenses for the operational expenses for the year, but they didn't have that, so we actually had to have capital expense for creating it by ourselves. So no, long story short, no, it's not. But the other thing is it's not only running our pretty website. We have frontline outreach team on the streets, and they have iPads. So right now their iPad data, it comes, it goes to a server, and then a person downloads the data from that iPad, from all the iPads, and then uploads them to our CRM. So that's my step 2 of my thing, is to get that to talk to it, and then the other one was to build a supporter services backend for our staff, so that they can actually talk to some of this data, because when our database provider said, oh, we're not also having a web portal anytime soon, and I'm like, I'm not creating like VPN remoting for, you know, all my supporter services stuff. So what I'm going to do is create a supporter services backend that that they can see and they can interact with at home. So my idea is that I'm going to use the API both for staff and for the supporters, because I've spent money on it and created it. Yeah.
Did you that much before?
I don't. Am I allowed to say it? They said we weren't allowed to mention any brands and stuff, but you can talk to me later. It's you. I don't think any of you all know them. They're quite a small one, but they specifically work with charities, non-profits. They're out of Sydney, so I'm guessing, like, I think here in New Zealand they've only got maybe 3 or 4 massive clients, and then the rest are like little tiny churches.
So then, what about the metrics that then you'll be able to get from this system? Are you looking at down the track, will you be able to measure the levels of engagement that the API is enabling over a historical trend?
Oh yeah, definitely. So our previous website was already on Drupal. It just looked a little bit ugly. And we had already been importing that data into our CRM. So we have got that data. And already, just like as soon as we flipped the switch, basically, we had 3 times the amount of people take action on our site because it was made easier. A lot of that is obviously the front end, but then what we did have was increased engagement because we could go out to these people quicker to say, hey, thanks for taking action on this, did you know about this? And because we had a quicker turnaround time on that, we have noticed a much less drop-off as well. So it's not just stabbing the dark.
and then also with that, sorry, follow-up, then there was one around the movement from 23 days to 1 day for taking action.
Yeah.
And then from donations, I think you said 3 to 5 days.
Yeah.
So then, how are you able to calculate the savings or what's the benefit? How do you calculate the benefit of moving the needle that much?
Faster. So the problem with the activism data, which is something that I've been working on for quite a while, is to get that sort of level of ROI. With the fundraising data, I don't have that data, but our fundraising team definitely have. There's definite drop-off. So one of the things that we do is, even on the website and on the and our frontline people that's going out, they sign people up for regular giving. So because, as I said, all of our funds have to be fundraised, the best way for us to fundraise is for you to say, yeah, I'll give you $20, but I'll give it to you once a month for the next, forever, until I cancel. And that helps us, because at the other end, if we have 100 people doing that, then we know that that's money coming in regularly. But the problem with that is, if anything happens to your donations between the time you sign up and the time you actually get that money taken out, and that if we can cut that right down to no time at all, or you say, hey, I want the money taken out next week, and we're like, yeah, sure, it's done, then there's a much what we call a pre-debit attrition. Otherwise, there is a significant number of people where before we did any of this stuff, sometimes it would take up to 2 or 3 weeks, because the people would sign up on a bit of paper. The paper would come back to the start. Someone would have to data entry the paper. Then they would have to check the data entry, and then the data entry would have to be created into an Excel file and then imported. So that whole process took pretty much about a week or more in some cases. And so once you got through all that, and then right at the end of that one maybe 2 week process, you find that the person's little writing was a little bit messy and the bank number was completely wrong, and therefore you couldn't take money out. Then you're phoning them and they're like, who are you? I don't remember talking to you because it's been 2 weeks, right? Whereas now you've got the iPads, they flick it in. The iPads already talk to our payment provider's API right now, before I've finished off the project to talk to our API. So right now it'll talk to the payment provider and they're like, that's not a real bank account number, or that's a wrong credit card number. So instantly right there, they're in front of them, they can fix those things. So that helps.
Thank you.